Let's bring in Simon Jackman, US political expert from the University of Sydney. Simon, great to see you. A big day in US history, really, the first president to be charged in such a manner. But Trump, as is his wont, straight back into campaigning.
And that's absolutely the context, Kieran. That speech at Mar-a-Lago at the end of the day was looked like a relaunch of his presidential campaign. And so he can't do much about the legal headaches he's got. That's on its own timetable now, the New York matter, and he's hired pretty good litigators to manage his case. He is back on the front foot politically, using, of course, the litigation as his calling card now in mission number one, and that is to secure the Republican nomination. And it's the politics of this are so fascinating, Kieran. This indictment has flushed out the position of any other Republican at the moment. It's very difficult for a Republican to be silent. Mitch McConnell is about the only Republican in the country who's been Easter Island on this. But even Ron DeSantis, one of his rivals for the Republican nomination, they've all had to come out and say that it's an outrage, it's politically motivated. And in that sense, it's so odd, Kieran, the politics here. This plays extremely well for Trump in that section of America that is likely to vote in the Republican primaries and caucuses. I think it plays extremely poorly for Donald Trump among independents and Democrats and people whose votes he needs to flip if he wants to retake the White House, presuming he gets the nomination, as I think he will.
Is there politics at play, though? The argument that this is the first of a number of potential legal hurdles for Donald Trump to clear. But within the US system, give us a sense of how this operates. We know previous presidents and political candidates have faced legal challenges, not of this sort, but we've had impeachments and so on. What about the politics of this?
Okay, so we should be clear, and I think Australians ought to remember that the district attorney in New York is itself an elected office, and I anticipate that the district attorney Bragg there in New York has ambitions, that this is the biggest day in his career, bringing 34 felony charges against a former US president, a declared candidate for president. And as soon as the target is a figure like Donald Trump, of course, it's impossible to separate politics from it. The DA is himself a politician at some level. Trump certainly is. A similar statement might be made about the matters pending in Georgia, where there's, again, a popularly elected, a politician herself, the DA there, is contemplating whether to bring charges against Donald Trump about election interference there. It is impossible at some level to separate the politics from this. Only the federal case does it look a little bit like what we would consider in Australia, where there's an independent director of public prosecutions. It's closer to that model at the federal level, where the Biden Justice Department has called in a special prosecutor who's going to operate at arm's length from the political appointees inside the Justice Department on the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. But Kieran, I think we have to concede the nature of the American system means when it's a criminal defendant like Donald Trump and popularly elected prosecutors in the American system, yes, politics is in the system. I don't think we can divorce ourselves from conceding that. On the other hand, what precedent would it set if, in light of the facts that are before everybody at the moment, that they decided not to go ahead? It would signal and that people are above the law, that presidents are like elected kings, immune from prosecution because we're worried about tarring them with a politically motivated prosecution. I feel as though there's a damned if you do, damned if you don't element to that charge about this being politically motivated. At least I just don't think there's any escaping that.
Indeed, but it's not just a former president. This is also candidate for the next election too. So there's a whole other layer of complexity there too.
absolutely, Kieran. And look, and that's the legal story and the political story are just intertwined now all the way to the ballot box next November. And I'm assuming Trump gets the nomination, right? We're not going to get a resolution of this matter until, we're not back in court until December. It's unlikely that Trump will appeal. The idea that this is resolved before the nomination is settled, or even potentially before the general election in November, I don't think is likely. Right now, Trump is seizing this as an asset for him, and it is working to his advantage as well in the Republican base. I suspect, though, and we'll wait for some additional polling data on this to confirm this, it is working contrary to his interests, contrary to persuading people to come back into his camp, people that left him for Biden 16 to 20, getting those people back in his camp. I don't think anything we're seeing today out of New York is all that speech tonight from Mar-a-Lago is helping in that regard.
Simon, great to get your insights as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran.